actual art curator would just be like, what is that? Matisse would be rolling over in his grave.
Hi, I'm George, the co-founder of Bluethumb, and I'm joined by my colleague Amy. Welcome to the Art in My Home podcast.
We uncover the surprising stories from the art collections and life journeys of unexpected guests.
Today's guest is Sarah Davidson. She's a former M&A lawyer turned funtrepreneur. She's the founder of Matcha Maiden and Matcha Milkbar, best-selling author, and the host of the popular Seize the Yay podcast. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a delight.
We like to start the pod, Sarah. We dive right into the art in the home questions. So you've sent us lots of beautiful photos this morning. I wanted to bring up that you've recently renovated. So if you could tell us a bit about your approach to renovating and styling your home and maybe how art fits in it or how it's planning to fit in it at this stage.
Absolutely. So we moved into our place in August last year. I was newly pregnant and pregnant for the entire renovation. So I was much less useful than I had originally intended to be. I did a lot of lying down and supervising, which was actually wonderful. Thankfully, my husband is very handy, so he did a lot of the heavy lifting. But because we had a little one on the way, we kind of managed to get it done pretty quickly, which is great. We've been living in since November last year, and Nick is very handy. His dad was a builder. He's not a builder, but he's kind of one of those people who needs to absorb and learn everything. He gets really into a niche area and will learn every single thing he can. So he did most of the renovation himself, short of the plumbing and the electrical, which I sort of thought we should maybe get experts in for those ones. He pretty much did everything else. We didn't change anything structural because the floor plan was really good, but in terms of gutting it visually, like we've redone every surface and aesthetically done full renovation. He did all the nuts and bolts and the rearranging shelving and building all those kinds of, he built a walk-in robe and he did the kitchen, and then the visuals and the interior design was my role, which was the Pinterest dream of my lifetime, right? I've been waiting for this moment since I entered this app. I don't, have any skills or background. I'll know what I like when I see it. I couldn't put together a room in the abstract, but I know how to look at inspiration, bring a mood board together and then kind of go shopping for those things and make it work in real life. In terms of art, I am incredibly embarrassed to say art collection is definitely way too fancy and cultured to describe what we've done in the house. We sort of didn't have a place that we could have a lot of beautiful art pieces in our previous house. So we're very new to being able to choose and curate in a full art collection kind of sense. And even now, the pieces that we already have, we haven't even mounted on the wall. So it's a very noob collection at the moment. So I wouldn't say that we've sort of designed our whole rooms or color schemes around particular artworks, as much as I would love that to have been the way that we did things. It's more that we sort of chose an overall feel, which was quite timeless. We didn't go any big statement colors in the furniture because we wanted the artwork to be the thing that could change in terms of color, and that the furniture and the big permanent structures were the more neutral colors that could kind of stay permanent. So yeah, we did the big furniture pieces. The floorboards are quite neutral. They're engineered timber. The walls are all neutral colors. The sheer curtains and all that kind of thing are quite neutral. And then in the bathrooms, we went a little bit more colorful, but then it was once we decided what's going to go on the walls that we thought this is where we choose the accent colors. So we picked either photos. We've had a lifetime of beautiful travel adventures. Nick is big into photography, and we'd never put any of those memories anywhere. They just live on our phone. So we thought we'll pick color schemes and statement memories based on mainly photos more than paintings, print those and then work backwards. So we kind of chose pieces, and then we're like, the cushions would match the sand in that photo, so let's go a rust, or let's go a deep burnt orange, and we kind of worked backwards from that.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds like one of the quickest renos ever. Amazing to because the house looks amazing on socials. Yeah, how long was that?
I think it was maybe 11 or 12 weeks from complete gutting everything to moving in and then just finishing touches. And it was because Nick could do so much of it himself. We never had the timelines of, having to fit in with trades schedules. They're so busy that often there's such a big lead time. Whereas I'd just be like, Nick, I need a cupboard. And he'd be like, okay, let's go to Bunnings. And then 2 days later we'd have a cupboard, and it just was very handy.
Gosh, he's such a man of many talents, isn't he, though, Sarah? Photographer as well.
Oh, he's definitely that person that he will decide he wants to acquire a new skill, and then he'll just acquire it. Like, he just goes into a deep dive and like gets hyper fixated. I don't want to bandy around ADHD, but draw your own conclusions.
Yeah, I get that thrown at me too. So yeah, I love the approach of choosing kind of a statement piece or statement photography piece and then working backwards with the other accents. Because I can see you sent through some pics here, and I can see there's a nice shot of you guys at the pyramids, and then the styling below it, and the furniture's got this chest of drawers that like matches the colours in it, and the same with the Matisse piece in your couch. So, for a self-described noob, it seems like there's actually a fair bit of thought into how you've styled these rooms with the art.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. I literally just went, what's the colour palette? I definitely found that before we had anything on the walls, before we sort of had pops of colour, even plants around the place, it's funny that you have all the nice furniture and, a monochrome dream, but it just looks bare. There was no warmth or personality when everything's just beige. And I mean, it's still quite neutral, but it's so interesting how noticeably empty a house feels without anything on the walls. I didn't think you'd notice it as much. You would almost think that putting things on walls would make it look smaller, but it somehow expands the space because otherwise it's just this big blur of white. So I definitely thought, I mean, it's so funny that you say a Matisse piece. It's literally like a printout of probably not a real Matisse design, and it says the word Matisse on it, which is very not what Matisse would actually do. But like, I liked yeah, it still counts, right? Like, any actual art curator would just be like, what is that? Matisse would be rolling over in his grave.
We are not here to judge.
Yeah.
We're here to appreciate.
He was the one artist I studied in high school, and yeah.
Really? Oh, yeah. Well,
it looks like, yeah, they definitely are prints.
Matisse-esque.
Sure. Yeah,
Matisse-esque inspired.
Yeah. And I feel like most of our friends aren't so advanced in art curation that they'd be, really judgy. But it's really interesting. When we had all the furniture or the big pieces of furniture in the house, I had taken a photo of all of the different areas. And you know how you can edit photos on your iPhone in the Photos app? I'd drawn little rectangles on the walls that I thought needed things on them, and the size that I thought it needed to take up. And I knew that in that particular spot where the Matisses are, loose Matisses, I knew I needed 2 big size things. I didn't want 3. 3 would be too cluttered. 1 would be not enough. I just was like, 2 is balanced, and they need to be about, I think we did A1. A3 would be too small. A2 still felt too small. A0 was too big, and I wanted them to be portrait. I don't know why. I just had drawn the little red things, and then I kind of filled the gaps from there. Whereas a little bit further back in the entry hall, there's 3 different walls where you could have something on there. And I just knew that the middle one was the one that was going to have an AO piece, and that because it didn't have furniture, it could be any color, which is where we put a kind of Slim Aaron style photo that is a bit more blue, and there's no other blue really anywhere, but it goes because there's nothing that it clashes with. And then one of those walls has a mirror, and then the other one has a plant. So it all kind of balanced out. So even though I'm not using any particular design theories, I just had this very clear, like, there needs to be something there, that could be bare, and that needs a mirror. And I just filled the gaps like that.
Absolutely. Well, that's a lot more thought than I've done at my house. And I guess it's,
it looks like you've got a beautiful piece behind you.
Yeah, I do.
Strategic.
Yeah, I'll blame ADHD. It's not as well laid out. It's funny you mentioned Slim Aaron's, because you sent through some of those photos as like this really nice pool scene that reminded me of like Como with a pool. And then there was definitely an Italian looking beach as well. And my question was, who's this photographer? I thought it might be Slim Aaron's or, someone similar, referencing David Hockney, but as a photo. Turns out it's Nick.
Yeah, like the hyperfixation on getting the full kit. So he's always been a very keen photographer. Again, self-taught. Again, just decided one day, we've been together for 15 years, so we've been through a lot of these hyperfixation. I'm going to get really skilled in a particular area and buy all the gear well before he has an idea. But then to his credit, he'll actually learn how to use it really well. So when I was still a teenager, I think, my goodness, he bought a Canon, and it was like a very entry-level SLR, and then worked his way up to photography, videography. He now is like into Leicas, like he's a proper photography nerd. And yeah, parts of our travels is always spending a bit of time capturing. He has no particular style. He's very versatile in that he loves like really tight people shots, and then he'll do like a landscape that looks Slim Aaron's-esque. And we went to a wedding in Lake Como. Very good pick, by the way.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, and he had the drone up, and he just happened to get that photo, and all of us are in it, in the pool. And we were looking, I wanted a Slim Aaron's picture for one of the walls. And then I was like, don't you have a picture that looks almost exactly like that you took, that we're in, that's even more, like, I'm very sentimental. So I love the idea that you could see all of us and the, married couple, and that he took it. It meant more to have that on our wall than to have an actual, famous photographer. I love that it's his photo. And I think everyone who's in the photo now has it printed on their wall in their house. Like we all have that same one, which is really cute. We gifted it to the couple.
Lovely.
Yeah. And then the other one that we have in the bathroom, which is Monte Rosso in the Cinque Terre, it's kind of an angle that has the signature orange umbrellas and that big rock, and then the turquoise waters. So everyone who's been there has that photo from that angle. But for some reason, Nick's just captures, there's no people in it. I don't know how, because it was quite crowded that day. And he just got it from this angle that captures it. And this was on his Leica. And so I was like, well, obviously we need to have that one, because I think you should literally sell that. That's amazing. And everyone's always like, where did you get the one in your toilet? Like, can we please buy that? Or where did you get it? I'm like, well, here's my discount code at the checkout. It's Nick's.
Yeah.
Well, we have photographers too, so he's welcome to join Bluethumb.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. He totally should, because people ask quite often.
He needs to monetize right now.
Yeah, well, it sounds like he's put in the work to be at that level anyway, which I love. Yeah, he should get on.
Yeah, he loves it. He's so talented at it. And so he has a creative agency, and for a little while he did do a lot of photography and videography, but it's interesting that he found, and this is something that I talk about so much on CZA, as soon as it became creativity to a brief, he stopped enjoying it. And so he actually stopped taking photos for maybe 5 years. He didn't really do any expressive photography because he'd been burnt out from having to do it as part of his work. So it took a little while for him to pick the camera back up and then re-find the joy of just doing it for fun. And now he's like, that will strictly be for pleasure. I won't do that as part of my job. I want it to be when I see a moment, there's no pressure to capture it in a particular way. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And now, he's found the joy for it again, which is really nice.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
I think there's something really nice also about travel photography. It captures that moment in time, and it's like the memory's there for you. So it's nice you put it on the wall as well.
Yeah, well, like I said, they live on your phone. We all take so many beautiful photos, and because of the volume of them, and I think because we're out of the habit of having to print them, you often don't ever have them on display for you to just look at and peruse and transport yourself back to that memory. So I thought, we have done so many amazing adventures together. I'd love our house to be a reflection of those memories. And there's a couple more that we haven't printed yet. My last trip before I got pregnant was Antarctica. And I'm like, I'm never going to go back there. And that's so foreign. Our normal life represents nothing to do with our experience there. I would love to have one of those photos so that every time you look at it, I think art sparks an emotion. And for me, that's photography of experiences when I was there, when the photo was taken. I mean, there's a really, really big photo, 2 big photos over our bedhead, which I didn't send you. Or did I send you? Yeah, of our wedding.
You did, yeah.
Now I'm like, that's a bit weird that we look at ourselves. Like, I love that it reminds us of our special day, but I probably should have chosen something different. We just sleep under our own faces, which is kind of weird. But yeah, Nick at one point was like, can we do some more landscapes and not just us everywhere? I'm like, yeah, sure. But you take the point that it's the memories are nice.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And I think you first came on our radar when Christina sent you an Andrea Bainton piece, I believe. It was Andrea Bainton, wasn't it?
Yeah. And that was so wonderful because it was the first in our new place time that I had thought it was so colourful. And it was the first time that I had, so we didn't have anything on the walls, I think, when that arrived. It was the first time that I'd thought, oh my gosh, I don't have any art. I only have photos on my radar. We actually need to start thinking about places for artwork. And we now have the opportunity, like there's so many blank walls still. There's so many photos I have that still have the red blank rectangles spots. I'm like, now we can actually learn about beautiful new artists. And Bluethumb is like, I'm so excited to have a relationship with you guys, because I was like, yes, we actually can go and discover some amazing new pieces.
Yeah, fantastic.
And oh, no, you got. I was going to say, you also mentioned that you're getting a commission done of an artwork by an Indigenous artist, Rach Sarah, I believe.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so Rach is a Gorong artist. She lives in Queensland, but she's a really good friend of ours. We started with the same management and then went on a few trips together with Intrepid. We were ambassadors at the same time. And again, it's that theme of travel. But one of the most special things we did is we did the Flinders Ranges together, and getting to experience that and see it through her eyes as an Indigenous woman, experiencing these communities and having her family, like her mob had somehow communicated before she knew where she was going that she was going to arrive at certain places, and sort of being there while she experienced that part of her identity was such a special time. And also it was the first time that we had become really close. And she's an incredible artist. She's got a really modern take on traditional Indigenous art that's so colourful. It's like the opposite of monochrome and the opposite of beige minimalism. And that trip was really special to us. And so I said to her, and this was ages ago, life has gotten in the way, but she's making us an artwork, and she knew we were coming into a new house. That is, I said, like, I want something that's colourful. I want an Indigenous piece of art that is not just your typical browns and reds and earthy colours. I want your signature colour, but that she had drawn on her hand while we were away, sort of a landscape that reminded her of where we were. And then, like, before she'd seen it, and then when we got there, it looked the same, like the same curvature. It was so weird. And she's like, it just came to me on her hand. Yeah.
Wow.
And she'd drawn it at home. It was weird. She's like, I had seen this before, and then we when we got there, this is it. And it was just bizarre how the likeness. So she has all these shapes that remind her of that trip. And that was part of, like, watching her experience that. I was like, can you work that into a piece so that represents our time together and that particular trip? So that's what she's working on. And that will be a big statement piece somewhere. I think she often uses pinks and oranges and really warm colours. And I said, can you please do that? Isn't it just so amazing. Happy?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't have any sneak peeks yet, but that will be the big, colourful piece that we put up on our walls.
I'm sure it'll be incredible.
Yeah, her aesthetic looks, on brand for Amy, I think.
Oh, I love a pink.
love that pink.
And I love it because it's quite distinctive. Like, she's really embraced sort of the digital expression of art as well. So it's projected onto, like, bridges, and, like, there's a lot of light and art shows, or she's done large-scale murals. And I love that anywhere, or packaging, like she's done a lot of beautiful collaborations with, like, Frank Body and Glasshouse Fragrances, and you'll see it and you'll just know it's her work. Like, I don't know what it is that you can just tell, because no one uses that colour combination the same way as her.
And stylistically quite unique as well, like beautiful.
Now, I want to ask about CCA and also your entrepreneurial journey, Sarah. We were talking before this, and you kind of mentioned that your Matcha Maiden brand, which was, I think, was that your first big kind of step out of being a lawyer into launching something and taking that big leap. It eventually got kind of caught up in the illegal heroin trade and contributed to you selling it. That's me paraphrasing and slightly off what happened, I think. But can you tell us about that? Because it's incredibly interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we didn't get caught up in the heroin trade, just to be clear to everybody. Perhaps it would have been a more lucrative powdered business if we had gone down that pathway. But basically, as you mentioned, Matcha Maiden was our first business. My husband and I went into business together. It was a beautiful, happy accident brought on by a sliding doors moment. I was never one of those corporate refugees who left because I was desperately unhappy. I actually was really gratified by my legal career, and perhaps that's more worrisome now looking back, because I would have stayed for decades and not realised that there was more out there. Once you've ticked a lot of boxes in your life, like financial security, objectively successful. There's a lot of gratification in climbing a ladder. You often don't ask, like, am I actually happy? Or is there anything better? You can settle for good and not know that there's great out there. But I ended up, this is a very kind of abbreviated version of the story, but I ended up going to Africa, getting a gut parasite, coming back, being banned from coffee because I got adrenal fatigue, lost 15 kilos, and had to sort of get rid of all stimulants out of my diet or anything inflammatory for quite some time. So I quit alcohol, couldn't have gluten. It took a really long time to build up that relationship with wellness again. But discovered matcha was a much healthier and gentler form of caffeination than coffee, so I could tolerate matcha. Got hooked, couldn't find it. Nick and I ended up finding a beautiful supplier, ordered the minimum order. It was 2 million serves too many, and we ended up starting a business. And so it was a very, very happy accident, which was, I think we often ascribe too much of our story to luck, but we admittedly had incredibly lucky timing that we were first to market, but the demand was already there. There were Kardashians drinking it and talking about it. Just no one had stepped in to make it branded. So we had maybe like a 2-year or 18 months to 2-year head start on pretty much anyone else. We rode that wave, that exponential growth, and just were flying by the seat of our pants. Like a lot of people's challenge at the beginning is growth and demand. And there already was demand. It was more keeping up with it. It wasn't like trying to actively grow the business. It just was growing. It was keeping up with that. And that was an amazing, amazing first chapter. When it started to get difficult, I think is a lot of businesses have that 3 to 5 year itch when the novelty wears off, things slow down, competitors enter the market. You actually have to stop winging it and get serious about your strategies and formalize things a little bit. But at the same time as the challenges of my job becoming more corporate again as we grew and not looking day to day like I wanted it to look like, we entered this chapter of enormous logistical difficulties of a global drug ring using green tea powder to ship their stuff around the world. And suddenly the big challenge, for us had been scaling. It hadn't been like actually moving the powder around the world. Like, sure, shipping was expensive, but it was pretty straightforward. Once you learnt what you needed to clear customs, you just did the paperwork and you got it in. Suddenly we had just pushed into the US. We'd always shipped there, but we had set up a warehouse. We'd kind of incorporated over there and really made a go of making that more structured. And just as we'd sort of figured all that out, of course, the States had figured out that green tea powder was a high risk product and really cracked down to, like, instead of clearing things in a matter of 24 hours, things would get stuck for like weeks to months because everything had to be searched. All the boxes had to be opened. You needed like 24 different documents to even get your freight forwarder to get your stuff looked at. And documents that were really unnecessary, but just if you didn't have it, they could use that as a grounds to reject it. And so suddenly sort of everything that made it worth doing was impeded so heavily that it just became this uphill battle of we can't even move it around the world. And people always say, expect the best, plan for the worst. And there's so much in business that you need to be agile around because you can't control the circumstances. I don't think that like a heroin ring using your particular product to ship around the world is anything that you would ever expect would happen in your business journey. You can't plan for that.
Risk list.
I don't think it's really on anyone's. Like, you just can't plan for that. What do you do? And you can't complain to anyone. There's no heroin association that you can contact and say, can you use something else? Like, so that became one of the initial kind of catalysts for maybe it's time for a new chapter, whether that is investors, whether that's an exit, whether that's a merger, like whatever it was the start of the change, I think.
Yeah. And I didn't get to ask you before, and this is more a personal interest because we had an email automation company that we sold. You were acquired, or you sold that business, right? How was that?
Yeah, it was really interesting that it had been the vehicle for me leaving my legal career, changing my life completely. My whole identity had gone from a certainty-based, risk-averse legal brain who thought I'd be there for a million years to a random, agile entrepreneur who didn't know what I was doing in 5 minutes, let alone 5 years, let alone 50. And I think I spent a really long time patting myself on the back for making this big, scary jump, thinking that, once you find your joy or you find your passion, you sail on into the distance and like that's the end forever. So it was surprising to me when I'd changed my life, I'd done the big scary thing, and then, yeah, that 3 to 5 year itch hit me, and I was like, oh, this is weird. Like, I thought this was my passion and that this would last forever. And now I realize that, and this is part of Seize the A, is that your ultimate joy for life, I used to think it was like this static painting that hangs on your wall. But it's actually a jigsaw puzzle that you're always adding new pieces with each new experience of your life and then getting rid of ones that no longer serve you. It's never a static image. It's always changing. So whereas Matcha Maiden I thought was my forever move, nothing is your forever move. This was my 7-year chapter of moving me out of one thing and into another, helping me rediscover the creative side of me that was dying a slow death in corporate that I'd actually always had since I was a kid. But as the business got bigger, I got further away from the customer. I got further away from the storytelling, which is the bit that I love. I got closer and closer to corporate, which was the thing that I had tried to walk away from. And in the meantime, Seize the A had started to grow into its own entity. And I thought, oh, maybe this was just a step in the staircase, not sort of the end of the staircase. And so we actually originally started looking for investors more to help me step into a different role rather than the everything, to just sort of be able to focus on the things that I loved. But we took them on for 6 months and then they offered to acquire the remaining 50% because they thought that we were so ingrained that they couldn't run it without us. And I thought that too. But actually they could still use the founding story without us necessarily being part of operations. And I think the sign that I had not waited too long, but that we were definitely ready, is that when people ask, like, is it bittersweet to let go of your first baby? It wasn't bittersweet. It was just sweet. There was no bitter. I was just ready to say goodbye to it, which made me realize they were like, oh, but like, oh, you're giving it away. I was like, take it. I'm done. Like, I am ready for something else. Yeah. And that was a really big lesson. I was like, the fact I'm not feeling any bitterness or nerves, or, I mean, there were nerves, but no sort of like that clutch of like, oh, immediate regret the day after you sign the papers. I was just like, please, like, when is the soonest minute that we can hand over the reins? We have had a beautiful, life-changing chapter, but I'm ready for the next thing.
It's nice to have that certainty that you've made the right decision. I very rarely get it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have had it since and didn't have it until then. But I also think that timing is a really big thing. Like, you don't want to wait too long so that I think if I'd kept it any longer, it could have fizzled because we weren't as passionate about it. Whereas if we'd left it any earlier, I don't know if we would have found the right guardians for it. I don't know. It's a really hard decision, but we're very, very grateful that it all worked out at the time that it did.
Yeah, awesome. And you mentioned you were already doing CCA while that was kind of going. And CCA is an incredibly popular podcast. It's sort of one of my partner's favorite podcasts. I believe she's listened to all 400 episodes. You're at 400 episodes. Why did you start it? And I'd love to know how it got going.
Yeah, it was really, I think Matcha had become the side project when law was my main thing. And I've always felt that I needed to satisfy my brain by having lots of different projects at once. And so once Matcha Maiden became the full-time job, I sort of then needed my creative outlet, the thing that didn't have deliverables, like that was kind of just my passion project for the joy of it. And I had found, and this comes back to those jigsaw puzzle pieces, I'd found that, like, as I mentioned, I got further and further away from the customer. I wasn't kind of having the conversations directly as much as I wanted to. So I wanted another method that gave me an excuse to talk to interesting people. I also noticed as I started to get to do more speaking gigs as the business grew, that the stuff that founders would talk about, it's different now, but at the time, this was like 2016, maybe, like quite a while ago now. The stuff that we would talk about in the wings or the green room was not our revenue growth and our EBIT and our investors and our cap tables and all that kind of stuff. It was, I'm having a breakdown. I have imposter syndrome, or can I borrow your logistics person because I can't hire someone? Or like, it was all the shitty bits. And we would get massive reassurance from each other in hearing that we all just had no idea what we were doing and everyone was struggling and it's a roller coaster and no one ever doesn't have like outlived self-doubt. That side of things was the bit that we would bond over, but no one was talking about it anywhere. And I loved those conversations much more than I loved hearing how well everything was going. So I thought, I'm having the conversations anyway. Maybe I could just have them and record them, and then they would live somewhere forever. And podcasts were very new. It wasn't a crowded space. It also was more forgiving because of that. So I thought, I'll just buy a microphone. I'll use the free platform. It's not very high risk. It's fun to do. And I get an excuse to talk to people who would probably not otherwise say yes. And then I loved it. I was like, the storytelling is my favorite part. And it started very much as founders showing the nitty-gritty bits, you know, sort of that they wouldn't otherwise talk about. And then I realized part of finding your joy is also that not everyone should be a founder, because our ultimate combination of our passion and our profession is different for everyone. And I shouldn't be just pushing this one narrative of you find happiness by leaving corporate. I should be pushing this narrative of everyone finds happiness differently. So then I was like, well, what are the wildest combinations of jobs that I can find that aren't all founders? Like I had a zookeeper on who doesn't ever want a promotion because that takes her further away from the animals. And I was like, that's something I should talk about. And like we've had, you know, Gary Vee and big entrepreneurs, but then I was like, what if we also had undercover cops and emergency services and an astronaut I had on a couple of weeks ago? Like, what if I could show as many different pathways as possible so that anyone listening knew that there wasn't just one cool pathway? And in fact, I know people who have gone into business and it's killed their passion for the thing they love, and they've left it, gone back to their job so that their passion can stay for fun and not on a timetable with monetary expectations and stuff. And that to me was like, oh, these conversations about joy and fulfillment and the metrics we use to measure our life are more important than the hustle, kick goals, double your revenue every year kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know any successful entrepreneur who's driven by doubling their revenue every year. They're all driven by building something interesting or...
Yeah. And I found I was lucky enough to meet you actually a couple of nights ago randomly before this recording. And we heard from the founder of Catch of the Day who, you know, one of the big questions was about his $230 million acquisition or his exit. And he was like, fundamentally, I live in the same house, probably drive the same car. The big thing is I spend more time with my family. Like, sure, having $230 million removes a lot of stress. It removes a lot of obstacles. It gives you a lot of freedom of choice. But the metric he values the most is the time that it allows him. It's not the money in and of itself. It was what it allowed him to do with his time. And I was like, that is just so interesting that, you know, all those studies about people who, once you get past a certain wage, which changes every year as the cost of life gets more expensive, but once you get past, I think it's like 120 grand or something, the exponential rise of your happiness in like corresponding to the increase in your wage, it starts to peter out and it just doesn't make you that much happier. Not in and of itself, which I'm just like it's so funny that we still strive for those metrics for so long until we realize actually that's not the be all and end all.
No. Yeah. Like I came home from that talk and said to Lauren, you know, he sold Catch for 230 mil or whatever, and was asked, you know, how did life change? And he said, well, the two things that happened were, number one, I miss the people I work with. Yeah. You know, I kind of miss they were like a family. And number two, I don't fly economy. That's it. Yeah.
And I love that he was like, you know, which is like nothing. I'm like, it's everything. It's literally everything.
Yeah. He's like, oh, 230 mil. I can fly not economy.
Just a lazy 230 mil. Like, I'm sure I could change a lot of things with $230 million. But it was a really interesting point.
I would do the same thing. That would be the first change, not having to rough it in the air.
But he was more focused on he missed the people he worked with. He said it was more downside than up, really, it sounded.
I think he was really trying to impress upon everyone that doesn't really answer all your problems the way that you think it might. You do get to a point where it's, you know, I think once you're a multimillionaire, the numbers are just numbers. Like once all your critical needs are met and then the extra money you have for fun stuff and the fun stuff involving your family is met, like what else fundamentally is going to change with more individual dollars? Probably not that much. Although, yeah, I was like, okay, but once you fly business, like economy is painful.
You can't
like it's like, why ever let yourself see the light unless you know you can sustain it forever? Because oh my God, never let yourself get a taste unless you can do it every time.
Oh, so true. Sarah, you've also written a book, Seize the Yay. It's full of practical advice and uplifting stories. What was the process like going from podcasting to book writing?
Yeah, so it was, I think I was a combination of the opportunity coming up. A publisher came and sort of said that there was an opportunity, would you like to write a book? And I had always wanted to write a book. I never knew what on, but I love writing. So even since I was a kid, I used to write stories. But then in my legal career, I did a thesis because I loved the process of like writing, just language. I love writing. But I never had wanted to write a book until I knew what I would put out there. I didn't want to just do it for the sake. I'd waited till I had really felt like I had something I was excited to talk about. And by then, I think I'd done maybe 200 episodes. And I thought I have enough material now to pull out and like extrapolate the main themes on people's learnings about happiness and weave that into my own in chronological order so you could kind of read the story and know the context of where it was coming in, but pull out these consistent themes and learnings, like no matter what industry people are in and no matter what transitions they've made or whatever age or culture or background they have. There's a couple of, I think there were 12 chapters and there were 12 main lessons that are all the same. And yeah, the opportunity to write that into a physical embodiment of these audio lessons so that it was always there to refer back to. And then it just happened that by the time the book came out, it was the first of many stage 4 lockdowns where suddenly everyone's appetite for reading was greater than it had ever been. So it just happened to hit at a time where I didn't know when I was writing it that everyone would appreciate hearing that the productivity we always thought we had wasn't our identity. I mean, what better time could that hit you than when you're stuck in your house not being very productive? So it was a more transformative process than I expected that it would be. And I loved it. I really loved it. And I haven't written another book since because I don't think that much about how I see things has fundamentally changed since then.
Fair enough.
Amazing. Yeah. And, you talk about luck a bit, Sarah, but there's that saying, opportunity needs to find you working, or like the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I kind of think, if you're 200 episodes into a popular podcast, you probably worked pretty hard to have a lucky hit book,
Well, it's funny. I think I've always had such an interesting relationship to luck and then actually doing something with it. So I can never deny that luck plays a massive role in every journey. Like you can hit an idea or you can hit society at, too early or too late, and the same combination of talent and a good idea might not work. So yes, luck plays a huge role, but also more than one person will get that same kind of luck and not everyone does anything with it. So I think it's kind of a bit of both. And that's come from having been adopted. That's like the first sliding doors moment in my life where I had this enormous amount of luck to be born into circumstances that weren't particularly favorable in an orphanage in Korea, but then get the luck of growing up in the best country in the world. But then not everyone does anything with that luck. So at the same time as like, I didn't do anything to deserve that. I was a blob. I was like a 5-month-old baby and I got this chance, but then I've resolved to make the most of like the absolute most of that chance. So I think it's both. It's hard work and luck. Like you said, luck has to find you working.
That's a very beautiful attitude to have. It's way off topic, but it does remind me of Warren Buffett saying he's been lucky to be the most successful investor in history. It's luck because he won the ovarian lottery being born to a middle-class family in the USA. He's like, most of the world didn't get that chance. And, you sort of got adopted into Australia. And so, yeah, it's nice you kind of frame it that way. I need to be a bit more aware of my luck, I think.
Yeah, it's been one of those things that never lets me take for granted what otherwise of course I take it for granted, but when it really comes down to those hard-hitting moments, sometimes I really have to sit and think, oh my God, like you almost didn't get this chance. And so you really have to, like it's just in the back of my mind. It's always been like an inbuilt gratitude reminder.
Oh, that fits so nicely with CCA and everything you do, I think. And that actually leads on to a question. This is a bit more kind of abstract, but are there any artworks you think that would embody that CCA attitude?
Oh, I find yay in so many different media, but that's why I think photography is such a prominent part of art in our house, because I'm very nostalgic and I love transporting myself back to particular memories that bring me yay. I just think one of the biggest things about joy is that it's all about your environment. Like you can't control a lot of the things that happen in your life. We all have a big spectrum of emotions, but you can control your environment, and that does like 75% of the job. So you can be having a shitty day, but if you've got really nice things around you that help spark joy in you, that helps. And that's the same with, I'm sure, George, you feel the same way in business. If you surround yourself with other people who have a strong risk appetite, who are go-getters with really great work ethics, like it rubs off on you. But if you surround yourself with people who don't have those values, it's a lot harder for you to emulate them. So for me, in terms of art, I think about what mood or what feeling do I want that to create in me. And yay is the overarching thing that I'm always trying to kind of engender as much as possible. Anything that reminds me of something that makes me smile. And whether that's color, whether that's a photographic memory. I sent some of the pictures of things we haven't mounted yet, but pieces of art that my mum actually in her second career, so she was a teacher, but also had her own antique print business. And she has actually only recently revived this, which is why I have those pieces. And the main reason she revived it was going back into her inventory to find some pieces for Teddy. And one of her specialties was children's artwork. So original Disney frames. We've got a beautiful vintage Baba. Her favourite artist is quite specific and niche, but is Ida Rental-Outhwaite, who was a children's fairy illustrator. Mum's obsessed with fairies. And I will never look at a fairy and not think of my mum, ever. So there has to be an Ida Rental-Outhwaite in our house. When I was little, I would help her before antique fairs, like put the protective things on the frames and pack them all into boxes. And so every plate from Ida Rental-Outhwaite's books, like the fairies holding bubbles, I know all the pieces. And so nostalgic pieces of art like that, I want to have those in our house. And I want the Baba painting that was in my bedroom when I was a kid to be in Teddy's room, so that I always look at it and think of my childhood and how that ties in together. So yeah, I think there's many different pieces of art that embody Seize the Yay for me. There's not one in particular, but it's ones that make me smile about something when I look at them.
That really emote for you. Yeah. We have a
Sarah,
vintage Baba poster in Hugo's room actually as well.
Oh, that's so sweet. It's just like, I can't not look at those characters. Like, you look at Baba and you just smile. It's like the cutest little elephant you've ever seen. And I remember watching it as a kid as well. And like, it's just the colors, it's so like primary colors, really bold on the wall. It just stands out so much. And it sparks this like nostalgia of your childhood. So pieces like that.
Sarah, you've got a podcast, a book, and you do public speaking as well. Is there anything else on the horizon for you, or anything exciting coming up that you can share with us?
Oh my gosh, it's been the hardest it ever has been for me to answer this question. Because as George will know, we have babies of a very similar age. Teddy's actually just joined your little 8-month-old. Today he is 8 months old.
Oh, congrats.
And yeah, thank you. It's been like the best chapter of my life and the hardest all at once. And I think it's the first time, like, you can look at the timeline and you see from Matcha Maiden this momentum of like going from a very slow 10 years of building to a legal career to then Matcha Maiden, Matcha Milkbar, Seize the Yay, the podcast, the book, the speaking, like the exit, like everything was quite fast, to then suddenly the family side of my life became at the forefront. And I was pregnant for quite a while because we had a miscarriage at the start of last year. So that has pretty much been from 2022 to now has been this blur of baby. And, I was quite nauseous in pregnancy. So from pretty much the middle of 2022 to now was like nausea, pregnancy, miscarriage, reconception, pregnancy again, birth, postpartum, blur. Now I'm just sort of seeing myself again. And that's a really, it's like the end of 2024, like that's such a long time.
True.
And so for the first time in a really long time, I actually allowed myself time to just breathe from that. Like, I definitely burnt myself out towards the end of that. It was such a big breather to just enjoy the simplicity of not having inventory that had to go through a heroin level of customs all the time, And then everyone says, have a product, because if you have a service and you're the service, you can't scale that. It's your service for hours and all that kind of stuff. I've actually loved not having a product for a little while, because the simplicity of no inventory, no overheads, it's just, you're the MC. Here's the date you need to be there. Here's your brief. Here's your pay. You do the job, you get paid. That is so beautiful for me in this particular chapter of my life. I've enjoyed that so much. And then that's allowed me to become a mum and like grow into becoming a working mum and find that I can do a little bit of both and enjoy it and find some like nice blend of that in the middle. It's only in the last couple of weeks that I felt ready to even open my brain to the kind of thinking that leads to another idea. So I think I'm there. I think I'm like, ooh, I had this big, beautiful chapter of like, let's focus on reducing cortisol. Let's focus on getting your body primed to become a mum. And then let's become a mum and let's, just keep up with the chaos of that. To now, like, I feel that agitation that you often feel before a new chapter. And that often comes a lot more quickly, but it's kind of chilled out for a couple of years. And now I'm like, ooh, don't know what. Don't know where.
The spark
it's
is
been
there.
Unusual. Yeah, the spark is there. It's been really unusual for me. I need more. I'm not stressed enough. There is no time to introduce anything else. I don't know why I'm thinking of it when there's no minutes spare. But like we started Matcha Maiden, then the cafe Matcha Milkbar, and then Seize the A before the industries that we were in had developed. Like I started Seize the A when there were like a couple of podcasts I could name, and now it's very, very, not crowded, but it's just a lot busier. And then I put pressure on myself often to sort of find the next thing before that industry booms. And it's been weird to give myself permission to not do that for a couple of years. But now I'm like, okay, I think maybe there's something, maybe there isn't. I'm thoroughly enjoying the eclectic mix of TV, radio, emceeing that I have now. But it is running my business, but it's not a business. And so I think I'm ready for a business.
Sure.
I just don't know what that is. So stay tuned. Or don't.
TB5.
Or 2029. We could be still here and I'm like, I'm still loving doing what I'm doing. Who knows?
Fantastic.
Oh, I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. This has been a great chat.
Thanks, Sarah.
Oh, thank you guys. It's been so enjoyable. And George, we'll have to have you on Seize the A to hear your incredible story.
Oh, I'd love to. That'd be great. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
If you love art and hearing collectors' stories, please share this episode with a friend. And don't forget to follow the show, rate and review to help make the pod more visible. We acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional owners of the land we're recording on, and we pay respects to elders past, present and emerging.